I'm Sam Taggart with Can't Knock This, host of the first ever Door-to-Door Con, bringing professional collaboration to the direct selling and door-to-door industry. Go register your seat for our event, January 2018 at doortodoorcon.com. Okay, everybody. I'm Sam Taggart, for those of you guys who don't know me, and I'm here with Brady Anderson, the CEO of Sales Rabbit. This is exciting. This is, for those that are on Facebook Live or listen to the podcast, this is our first time ever kind of really uniting. We are the ones hosting Door to Door Con, and super excited to dive into a little bit of the history of Sales Rabbit and how Brady kind of got started and the journey of what made him really successful. What were some of the pain points? What were some of the the main things that you learned along this journey to be in the position you are? So a little bit about Brady. He is very humble, so I will brag about him. He started in door-to-door in 2010, and you did pest control for a few years. I'm sure some dude knocked on your door and was like, hey, let's go do summer sales.
It was actually a study buddy in the county.
Study buddy, okay.
So, yeah.
So study buddy says, let's do pest. You saw a hole in the industry, and you said, I'm going to develop this app that will serve the industry from a technology standpoint. And you were telling me that you coded literally a third of the code for V1 of the app. So not every door-to-door guy out there is like, oh, yeah, let me just write the code too. Most people are drinking protein shakes and doing whatever. So yeah, tell us a little bit about kind of that start of that journey of like when you kind of transition from door to door into like, hey, I want to build this app. Where did that idea originate from? How did that all happen?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm speaking honestly, it wasn't like I had this light bulb moment where, everything became clear and this is what I needed to do. It really didn't happen that way. I learned a lot. I started selling pest control in Utah, so a lot of people out there probably do that, but it's a little bit different. You don't have a ton of bugs here, and I went first 2 weeks without making a sale, and I was like, I don't even know if I can do this. But I went through that, and I gained all these experiences as I was doing door-to-door sales, and it was really hard. And then I went back and I did a second year as a manager and recruited a team and did it in Virginia Beach. But I never thought like, oh, I'm going to go build a software to help solve or help address a lot of these issues. But really, I think just subconsciously I was just learning and taking in all of that. And then it really got started after that second year. I came back to school. I was doing computer engineering, but I had sold during the summer and I was doing a business minor. So I had a classmate who thought I was like a business genius. And so he comes to me and he says, hey, we got to start a company. Like I'll be the programmer, you can do the business, and I let him think I was really smart. But that's how it got started when we. But at that point, we were just building apps and doing app consulting. So a lot of companies wanted to get their own app for their company, and so we were just started a company where we consulted and helped them build an app for their company, and then. From there, we wanted to build a product, and so it was really we were able to take my door-to-door background and say, hey, there are all these gaps, and then build on that with Sales Rabbit. But it's really something that evolved over time, and it wasn't like this big vision I had. But the vision constantly changes because it's kind of like one of those targets where it's a moving target. If I'm being honest, when we first started the company, I'm like, how many door-to-door companies are there? Because I'm like, okay, I tried to count them on my hands, like all the ones that tried to recruit me to go sell for them while I was selling, and the Apex of the world. It was back when it was Apex, and we're like, okay, there's, I know at least 20. There's got to be twice that many, so maybe 40 companies. If we build this, we could sell it to at least 40 companies, and so we were a little naive when we first started out, not really understanding how awesome and big the industry really is.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, over the last, 5-6 years, you've been able to build a company to, you've helped thousands of door-to-door companies, tens of thousands of door-to-door reps. You have over 50 employees, a massive office. It's cool. Like, and it's funny to like think, like, even when I when I was thinking door-to-door con, I was like, okay, we'll get like the major players there. The major players don't even like really. They're like, that's whatever. But it's like thousands of other people, and I'm like,
never heard of. Right?
Yeah, I'm like you said today, like this New Jersey solar company is coming, and it's like never heard of them. But it's crazy how big the space is when you start to like dive into it. So kind of when did that like all of a sudden dawn on you that it's like, oh, there's like more people that need this than I realized?
It's been over time. So I wouldn't say it was just a light bulb, because I think each step in the business we realized, oh, well, we got this many people that are using it and this many people that still want it. Like, there must be a lot more out there. And so I feel like we're still discovering all the time. We just recently, this is not even a U.S. thing. This is an international deal. Like, they do door-to-door in countries you would not even imagine. We've worked with companies in the UK, in Australia, in Saudi Arabia, in Norway. It's really massive. It's a worldwide thing. And so
what do they sell in Saudi Arabia? I'm curious.
So we worked with a telco company in Saudi Arabia, a sister company to T-Mobile, but I think it's like the T-Mobile of Saudi Arabia. But Kenya, like Tahiti.
I want to hear some of the coolest companies you've kind of.
I mean, it's not like the Saudi Arabia is probably the most interesting place we've actually had a client as Sales Rabbit, but I mean, you can really use Sales Rabbit wherever you are, as long as you have a device that will run it. And so I'd say Saudi Arabia, Kenya.
What was in Kenya?
I should know. So we have a map, and I don't know the product that's actually being sold, but I know the companies there. There's one in Tahiti. Like, some of the industries that are really big internationally are not necessarily the same ones that are here in the U.S.
Yeah, I just got reached out by a guy in Australia this morning, actually, and he's like, "Hey, I just saw your group, and I think this is really cool what you're doing." And I'm like, "What do you sell in Australia?" And he painted curbs, and I was like, "Well, I painted curbs," and it was like instant love. It's
in Australia and Europe, a lot of it is energy and charity. Where charity is not that common here in the U.S., but
they knock doors for charities and just look for donations.
And different. It's fairly common in Europe. So.
What's an interesting one is the political game. I didn't realize how big of a space that is. I just met this company Gather, and I don't know. There's all these different. Yeah. There's just so many different industries that I mean, you guys service over 30 industries, and we, most of us think pest, satellite, solar, alarm.
Yep.
And that's it. And then, I talked to that Anthony guy yesterday, and it was like the roofing industry is massive.
It's huge.
So, kind of tell us a little bit about how Sales Rabbit really makes a dent or an impact and helps the door-to-door industry. Like, where does it give its most value?
Yeah, a lot of what we've been able to do at Sales Rabbit, we've talked about all these companies, all these industries over the last couple of years, especially over the last 2 years, where we've kind of started to hit some larger scale. We've had the opportunity to see all of these different companies, and not just we see a wide range of companies, but we see a ton of first-class sales organizations, and it's in a variety of markets, industries, structures, processes, and because we have this massive, bank of clients and that we have the privilege of working with, we feel like we've benefited so much from just learning. And I feel no company does everything right. Like, there's always something that this you do really well, and then other areas where you don't. And so we've been able to kind of learn from the collective. Like best practices in each area, and I think that's something we bring to our product, Sales Rabbit, and something that really got us excited about Door-to-Door Con as well. Is that idea of using that kind of knowledge and not just selfishly holding on to it, but helping elevate the industry as a whole from that bank of knowledge, and because there's so much to learn, we want to accelerate that for everyone. And so we, I think, from an impact standpoint, really focus on driving our product with everything that we're learning from the best in class companies across so many industries. So.
Why do you see like event like Door to Door Con? Why do you see that cross collaborating and pulling different industries all under one roof? Like, why do you see that being such a big benefit for anybody attending?
Because, like I said, nobody does it everything as well as they can, and so I think if anyone thinks they do, then maybe they shouldn't go to the Door to Door Con. But I don't think there's really any sales org out there. Some are a lot more dialed in than others, but I think everyone has an opportunity to fine tune and improve different aspects of the sales organization. And so because there are gaps, there's other companies where one company maybe onboarding or maybe keeping reps motivated, or maybe it's whatever they are not great at. There might be another company that's their strong point, or another perspective in the industry. And so I think by bringing everyone under one roof, it allows people to fill in those gaps and just kind of, like I said, elevate as a whole and accelerate the learning across the industry. So, the water rises for everyone.
Oh yeah, it's like the water rises, all ships lift, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the exact quote, but
yeah, I think that's something like
comment it on there if you know the exact word. But like this, if you already got your ticket to Door to Door Con, we've already sold hundreds of tickets. It's super cool to see the momentum and the collaboration and all the new speakers we're adding. This week we'll have the website updated. We've got over 10 or so sponsors, a few more sponsorship spots available if you're watching this. But yeah, so if you're watching this or listening to this, like this if you've already got a ticket, or share or tag somebody that that should be going to Door to Door Con, because it's going to be an awesome event. And I've appreciated your guys' support and your collaboration and network, and you guys have done a ton to really help put that on. I mean, you played a big part. So.
Well, we're excited to see it come together. I think that's the thing I most look forward to. Is I think there's just never been a group that's really in a position to kind of agnostically really put on the event and for the betterment of the industry as a whole. And I think you've been super proactive with that vision, Sam, and we are really passionate about that. And so I think it's going to be a fantastic event.
Cool. No, thank you. So let me ask you this. What are some of I want to dive into some of the things that you've seen throughout your unique perspective. You know what I mean? You think you're looking at hundreds of companies and you're saying, wow, this one signed up a month ago and is already canceling service due to the fact that their door-to-door program flopped, right? And I'm sure you've seen that over and over again. And then you've seen some that you're you started with 4 users and now you probably have a couple hundred users, and you're they must have done something right? You're watching, you're wow, they're a client that just keeps growing, and it's they're obviously you're paying attention to probably some of that data, and then you're also probably paying attention to, I'm assuming, just the data of tracking areas and stats and dashboarding, and you guys have some big clients and just watching their numbers, and I don't know, do you guys pay attention to that from a company standpoint, or?
We try and pay attention to everything, right? Doesn't mean we see everything, but we try and always be in a learning mode. And you're exactly right. The everybody loves the idea of door-to-door sales. Look at it from a company perspective, it's super attractive.
Yeah. No overhead.
I'm only gonna pay when they create customers.
Yeah. When I make money, they make money.
So people fall in love with the idea of door-to-door, and sometimes that's as far as people get, or sometimes companies get. And so we see a lot of companies that really love that, and have either started or want to start a door-to-door program. But anyone that's done it successfully knows, it doesn't just happen out of thin air, especially at scale, which is another thing. And so we do see a lot of that where people really want to do it, they get excited about it, but it fizzles out because there's more to it than just recruiting people to sell door to door and not paying them until they make a sale. There's so many dynamics to creating the right culture, to being able to add the right value to the product, and even when it comes to process, to be able to scale that organization. And so we do see that. I think there's a great gap and need for better understanding when it comes to these organizations that are moving to a model that embraces door-to-door sales. They really can benefit from better guidance on how do they get from like wanting to do it to actually doing it, and then from there to actually scaling, because it's a lot of the challenges that we see don't necessarily happen when you have 2 or 5 sales reps, but once you get to 20, then 40, and then 50, and
you run into different
beyond,
problems.
you have a lot of different issues when you start hitting scale. And so it goes back to DDCon again, and also what we do on a daily basis. But I think one of the biggest missteps when it comes to taking the idea that people like about door to door and going from there is just not embracing a change in behavior, right? So I think if you go into it just thinking this is how it's going to work, I put in this and I get this, and it's this perfect formula, then I think you're setting yourself up for success. With door to door, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change behavior and adapt and learn, or you're just gonna flop. So we see a lot of that where companies are too rigid, or they don't have expectations aligned to where they're willing to adapt and learn and change behavior based on what they need to do to be successful.
What do you feel like some of the main adaptations, taking a company that maybe, let's just call it a roofing company, that's like, hey, I want to add a canvassing team or something like that, and what do you feel like some of the main adaptations or main points that they just need to like get it through their heads right now? If they're going to do a door-to-door program, they need to have X, or they need to make sure that they're willing to do X. What do you think those things are?
I think one is enforced process. I think a lot of companies fail by not knowing what the process is, for one, and then not enforcing it if they do have a process. And so it rarely works on a small scale, and definitely doesn't as a large scale if you just kind of, here's a binder, go make sales. And if that's all you're doing, then you're basically just hired a bunch of independent workers and may or may not succeed, but generally it's gonna fail. Like you need to establish process from the get-go of both when it comes to order entry, how the sales made, how the organization is structured with leadership, how training is done, what tools are used, what software is used, and so we find like companies that aren't proactive on first getting the processes in place and then enforcing them really struggle from the beginning.
Yeah, because I bet you a lot of people, how many people get the sales rabbit and they just never use it? Like,
it's just
because they can't enforce it. You know what I mean? They're like, we have it, but just sits there and it doesn't get much engagement.
Yeah, I mean, software by itself doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
signing up for anything, it never gets you to where, and that's why at SalesRat we spend a lot of time focusing on what companies, the outcomes companies want, right? So we don't talk as much about we're going to help you track sales rep A, or we're going to help you.
Yeah. So Johnny, we'll follow him around.
We laugh, but like people come to us and they're like, okay, well, I need sales rep because I need to know where my guys are, or like weird stuff like that, right? Where it's like, I think what we try to do then is orient them on what they should care about, which is more sales, right?
Yep.
If you're coming to us, and if you want to work with us or you should be focused on more sales. How does tracking someone's location, like how does that? And so it's kind of like going to a store, and if you're going to buy a drill, you really don't want the drill. What you want is a 4-inch hole that the drill is going to produce for you. And
I like that.
And so we really like to think about it that way. Is sales and more sales are what our clients want. So we really try and orient with that in mind, and then and try and produce the behavior with the software that's going to result in more sales.
For sure.
Rather than focusing on these, these ideas that don't necessarily translate directly into sales.
So I'm a manager. You're my rep. What things can I do? I'd love to manage you, by the way. That'd be so fun. I'd be cracking the whip. No, but at the end of the day, like, I'm the manager, you're the rep. I have Sales Rabbit. What are some things or advice that you would, well, let's say one should give me to make sure that I can help get more sales out of my team by utilizing some of the software like Sales Rabbit?
I think measuring results is super key. So sometimes in big organizations we take it for granted because there's some good systems in place where you can see leaderboards or you can see contacts or closing rates or homes installed, but for a lot of organizations, because we see a lot, like, that's not something
they don't have that.
They don't. And so I think that's super key is getting metrics in place that and make it public. Like, I think sometimes we see people that are afraid to do that. Like, they want to isolate it to just one team, or they want to, there might be some companies for whatever reason where it's a bad idea, but for the most part, I think, broadcast it to the entire org.
This guy knocked 10 doors, and this guy knocked 100
exactly.
doors. There's a reason why he's killing it.
And so I think sometimes there's a fear that, like, low numbers are going to drag everybody down, but I feel like the opposite's true. You have to have some top performers in there, but you got to be transparent and show, like, what are the top performers really doing, and here's why. And
a lot of the behaviors are seen from the data from technology and apps.
Yeah, and it shows. You can see, well, the top performer is getting these results, and here's the numbers that show, like, why, because of the inputs that they're doing. So.
Yeah. So I'm sure Sales Rabbit didn't have the dashboarding feature in its initial phases or launches, right? But that was something you guys definitely implemented, showing, like, dashboards and stats and ability to kind of track, like, top guy, like the manager dashboards, and being able to publicize that and show the impact of having...
Yeah, it's definitely been an evolving thing. In fact, as we've been able to learn from all of these organizations, we've been able to continually improve. And we're actually super stoked on some aspects of dashboards, and we actually have more changes coming out in Q1 this next year, where it's changing more than it ever has since we started the company. And so we're super excited, both from, like, an interface standpoint and just from an ability and the analytics you're able to gain is kind of our version of next leveling that solution. So, but it's always evolving. Like, technology, like, if you're static and you're not changing, then you're just going to
think of, like, how disruptive companies like Google and Apple and some of these companies that really pay attention to analytics and all the stats and behaviors of humans and how they can now market based on how we function on the internet. You know what I mean? And it's like, why aren't we doing that in door-to-door sales? And it's like we're also stuck in the old, like, we knock, half the time we write it down, half the time we don't even care, we're on to the next neighborhood, and we just, like, plow through the neighborhoods and hope we get sales. And it's like, it's such a dumb way of doing business, in my opinion. It's a very low-level business thinking. And a higher level, a more organized, a more professional way of doing it would be, if I'm the manager, I'm sitting there looking, okay, these guys all knocked 50 doors, and, these guys all knocked 20 doors. These guys close way more. I can then go to these guys and say, look, let's just, like, if you can commit to knocking 50 doors, I bet you'll be closing like these guys. The problem is just simply you're not knocking. Or it's like, okay, all your X's are callbacks. It's like, well, why do you have so many callbacks? And then you can go analyze it and be like, okay, I need to work with your closing, your closing skills, or I need to work with your follow-up, or I need to work with, you know what I mean? And just, like, that's a smarter way of doing business. And I think too many people are just lazy, and they just are kind of like fly by the seat of their pants, and they don't effectively manage their teams or companies and stats.
Yeah, I think when we often think about scaling sales organizations, sometimes we exclusively think of that in terms of more headcount. So if we got to scale the sales org, we got to like go from 20 reps to 50, and then from 50 to 200, and while that is a really, really important piece, and that's key in scaling, but you can scale a sales organization without adding any headcount by just making those sales reps that you do have more effective, more efficient, selling more, and then that's actually going to help with your number 2 goal, which is recruiting more reps, right? Because everybody wants to work for a company where the reps are successful, or
100%.
Or that the sales people are successful. So really, I think sometimes organizations get that backwards, where that's their primary concern, and they're thinking, well, we really got to scale, we got to recruit. It's like, number 1, take care and make sure that your reps and your sales guys are being successful, and you're producing successful outcomes and improving, and then the recruiting is going to come a lot easier. And so on that side, you can increase your per rep averages without,
you scale and grow without adding any.
Yeah, I mean, we just look at it in a really simple way. If you want to know how that works, it's how many sales you're making is simply a function of the people you're talking to, the hours you're putting in, and the number that you're closing for every person you're talking to, right? And so those 3 variables, hours that you're actually working, how many people you're talking to, and then of those people, how many you're closing, combine to basically produce how many sales you're going to make. And so we try and orient Sales Rabbit to reinforce those 3 kind of pillars, where we're going to help motivate you and help you work more. So you want to work more, not only work more, but more energized, right? Because you're motivated. And then in the time that you are working, help contact more people, basically cast a wider net, and then close more. And I think anyways, we love working with companies on helping to improve that per rep average, because when you do that, then it's a snowball effect, and that leads to recruiting better and really scaling the company.
Let's kind of shift gears into like scaling a company, because I think that's where. And if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not a CEO listening to this, because you might be a manager or rep or whatever, but the same principles are probably going to apply to where I need to scale my team from 10 guys to 30 guys. And sometimes that's just hard. You just don't have the systems in place. So, like, obviously getting Sales Rabbit to where it is now, where you're probably doing who knows how many millions in revenue or whatever you do, but, like, it probably wasn't easy for you to just be like, boom, we're there, and it took time. But, like, what are some of the key principles or attributes you find that helps a company scale themselves? Like, go from the 20 reps to the 40 reps, or go from the, you and a couple buddies coding a computer to now you probably don't do any coding, I'm assuming. You have other people.
I actually love to do that, but I don't have as much time now. If I do
You're not going to go to that coders event or whatever?
I'm doing it late at night or on weekends, and I'm sneaking it in when I can. But
that's funny. No, that's interesting that you still kind of have this, like, it's like me.
Fun.
I like knocking. I like most people are like, I hate knocking. I'm like, dude, I like get the itch. So, like, I'll be driving around a neighborhood. I'm like, this is a good hood. I just need to get out. I was just like, go knock. But
I do miss the stories. I loved, like, going, I do summer sales, and I loved going home after, like, a day, and just, like, the stories, like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me on the doors today.
So I'm doing a documentary next summer where it'll be all about just filming and going out into the day of the life of door-to-door guys all over the country.
Yeah.
And I hope to capture some of those unique stories.
That's like the thing I miss the most, is just the things that you would never experience if you weren't randomly knocking on doors.
It's like, this lady had a pet raccoon. You're like, oh. So kind of, let's go back to
scaling.
Scaling.
So scaling, how to scale a company. I think there's not like one secret sauce answer. That's just the key to everything. But a couple of things that I think help are, at least that's helped in our experience, in my experience, is our first investor would always refer to me as really scrappy. And I take it as a compliment, right? But because we went a long time without taking any funding, any money, and we just had to, like, we didn't have money. We had to figure out how to make things work. Like, we had to do things that most companies do with money that we didn't have. So how do we build the software? How do we market it? How do we do all this? And we had to use creativity. So I think it goes back to being willing to adapt and learn, and just really scrappy in that regard.
What were some of the most scrappiest things you've done? Like, where you're just like, man, we literally duct taped this together and somehow popped this out. Like,
I mean, I would say it's a lot across the board. I mean, we're in a pretty. Here's one. We're in a pretty. We're lucky enough to be in a nice office here in Lehigh, and but before here we were in an area in Provo. It's called Jamestown. There's a lot of dentists and doctors' offices, and it wasn't very nice, and we were just like growing, and we were out of office space, and so we literally had people's desks and workstations in the hallway of our office. So as you walk,
it's like Dwight in the bathroom.
Yeah, so it was pretty, like, we were like sardines in a can, and just we didn't have a new space. We had to make it work. So desks were like in the waiting area, just like places that were not intended to actually house people. So we had a guy that was trying to sell our software and do demos in the kitchen. So his desk was like our kitchen counter, but that had the fridge. So people are going in to grab their lunch, and they're interrupting his demo. And
he's like, "Come on, I'm on the."
So I don't know. That's an example. But I think that's important. I'd say just one other thing is well, two other. So one thing that I feel is really important that helped me is live in the moment, and because you never know how that's going to impact you down the road. And so I would say with Sales Rabbit, I didn't from the get-go have this grand vision of what it was going to become, that we'd have 50 employees and support all these individuals, but and it never would have been possible had I not talked to that person in my class and done pest control here in Utah, and then managed the pest control office, and so in that time though, when I was doing that, I had no idea how that was going to help me down the road, and so I think nobody ever knows what the future holds, and so it's super important to just really make the most of your experiences now, because it could impact you a ton down the road. And so I think if you're not scaling a business now or starting one, like, it doesn't matter, like, just be a sponge and you absorb everything you can with what you're doing now. If you're a sales rep at a company, do the best job you can, or learn the most you possibly can with what you're doing today, because a year from now that might have more impact on your life than you know. So
yeah, no, that's great advice. I think a lot of us live in the future, and we live grass is always greener, or we live, I want to be a CEO of, I'm going to blow up this. It's like, people need to enjoy the journey. That's a huge philosophy that I have, is just like, where you're at now, you need to be happy, and where you'll be one day, you'll need to be happy.
Yeah.
Just life's all about being happy. So what were some of the biggest challenges maybe you ran into with scaling the business at Sales Rabbit? Like, what were some of the biggest hurdles that you felt like, maybe even that day where you're crying at night and you're like, wife, like, we're not, we can't pay our rent. Like, were there ever moments that you had that was kind of like really challenging?
There's definitely been challenging moments, over the years. I think, generally, things worth having don't always come easy. And so, I think one thing that was somewhat difficult, at least for me, was early on. I went about 2 years without, ever taking a paycheck. And so I was working a long time. I'd done door-to-door sales, and I was going to school and mostly eating cereal, so I didn't spend a lot of money. And so, but I went 2 years trying to build a business and pivot and without ever having a paycheck. And then when I finally did get a paycheck, it was $200 a month, right? And so,
because you're selling a $20 app, it's like
It's like, yeah, we got 10 quotes.
I mean, it was just the money was going to other people.
Yeah, no, I'm just playing.
And so, but that was a time in my life where I just got married, right? And so, you know, all the new dynamics of getting married and
I can imagine.
you know, bless my wife. She was working at Jamba Juice as a manager, so we were living off of, you know, we spent all the money on the wedding, so living off of a manager. So I think that's hard for people at least for me, that was a difficult challenge, was just, you know, staying motivated, even though, like, it takes time to actually see. Because I think if in the moment, had I seen the vision of everything like that it is now, like, it would have been super easy. But you don't have the vision of the success, and so without that, I think that's what makes it challenging. Is it's super uncharted territory. It's unknown, and so you got to find ways to stay motivated. And it helps if you love what you're doing, and so I think that's what was most beneficial and how I was able to, me and the others involved that were really invested, were able to stay motivated and dedicated just because we really enjoyed it. Even though it was stressful and it was difficult, we enjoyed what we were doing, and so I think that's how we were able to overcome it.
Yeah, but what a principle in life, though. I mean, how many times do we give up a year into it when it's like, man, it's been a year and I haven't taken a paycheck, not 2 years, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, when are you just going to call it quits and be like, man, I got to go get another job, and then all of a sudden this gets put on the back burner, you know what I mean? Like, that happens so often where our dreams get so cut short due to our impatience and our inability to just sit with the you know, like, I don't see sales rep with 50 employees. I don't see hundreds of companies using us. I just see that I can't pay my bills really well, and my wife is the only one feeding us, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just such an interesting principle that we all have probably been through, or a lot of people listening to this are probably going through now. So, you know, it gives hope to all those out there.
And I mean, that happens in so many situations, not just starting a business. You know, I like in my first. It's kind of like my first year selling door to door, and probably most people's first year doing D2D is, you know, maybe on a shorter basis, but you didn't see any success and you didn't see how it was going to work. And I went, you know, 2 weeks and just donuts every single day, you know, and until you get that first sell, it can be tough to because people tell you it's possible. You see other people making sales, but you haven't experienced it, so you got to find a way to just stay motivated and, you know, kind of trust that over time you're going to get that first sale and then go from there.
Super true. Well, one last question, because we kind of are short on time, and so if you're watching or listening to this, just so you guys know, Brady is probably one of the most down-to-earth people. I've been able to work with him over the last 6 months or so, and if you're using Sales Rabbit, you should be grateful for all the hard work that you guys do behind the scenes. I think a lot of people don't realize the journey and the challenges and the amount of hours and late nights that have gone into creating a product that really makes an impact for a lot of people. And sometimes I think they just take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like, it just sits there on their phone and they don't leverage the tools that they're even paying for. So, like, if you're watching this or listening to this, like, realize that these guys have done a phenomenal job, and, you know, also give them a shout out on Facebook, like Brady, or share this podcast, share this live, and then get your ticket to Decon. It's time's running out, and a lot of times we fail to prepare, then we'll just end up not doing it. So go plan. You know, it's about 6 weeks out, so go get it, ddcon.com. But I had one last question I thought was really pertinent to kind of you guys as a thought leader behind the door-to-door industry and agnostic as you are. Where do you see door-to-door going, like, and evolving and adapting? Like, what do you see as the future of door-to-door in general?
That's a great question. I feel like, you know, you could answer that in a lot more time than what I'll take.
Yeah.
It's a really deep question. I think what I see personally from what I've observed and seen going on right now is I see it growing. I see it changing a lot at the same time, and so what is going to change a lot over the next several years is the products being sold and the pitches. Sometimes we think like those are so solid they never change, like the alarm cell or the solar cell. But I think there's going to continue to be a lot of dynamics that are going to change what products are being sold and how those are being pitched. But I think D2D as a whole is going to gain more momentum over the next several years. I think one thing that's going to become really important for these sales organizations is simplifying and simplification, because I think it's going to become more and more important to be able to sell more complex products and sometimes multiple products, and that starts introducing a lot of complexity. Think of like the solar cell. That wasn't something that was super prevalent door to door before, but it's, in a lot of ways, it's a lot more complex than a lot of other cells that are. So I think that kind of trend where cells are a lot more complex and multiple products are being sold by the same person is going to continue to happen. And so it's going to require these sales organizations to really figure out, how do we simplify this and not overcomplicate it for the sales professional? How do we make it so it's still easy to pitch, easy to understand, easy to get up and running successfully without having to take a 2-month course on how to do it? And so that's some of the kind of short observations I'd say. I'm really encouraged by what I've seen in the industry, and I'm excited to see how it continues to evolve over the next couple of years.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, you guys have a good pulse on the industry, so I'm sure it's fun to watch. Like, man, I keep seeing new lighting companies. They come and knock, and you're like, why is lighting coming into the industry? You know what I mean? And 5 years ago, solar was irrelevant. All of a sudden, now it's like probably one of the biggest door knocking industries. You know what I mean? It's just always evolving, and I think it's important for anybody listening to this or watching this, just be willing to adapt. Like, that was a big focus of your podcast, was just how to be willing to make those small changes and adapt and moldable, and that's what creates success in this space. So that's cool. No, I've appreciated this. This has been good.
Fun.
So thanks for listening, guys. I'm Sam Taggart with the D2D podcast. Make sure to join the group or go register for your ticket. Brady Anderson, CEO of Sales Rabbit. Thank you.